The stars looked different through the observation deck of the human vessel. Captain Deho stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the massive alien structure growing larger in the viewscreen. The Valtharian capital station was unlike anything humanity had ever built. It looked like a crystal flower frozen in space, each petal the size of a small moon, glowing with soft purple light. Hana walked up beside him, her tablet clutched against her chest. She was the communications officer, and her face showed the stress of the past 3 months. Learning an entirely new language was hard enough. Learning one that included telepathic components made it nearly impossible. "Sir, we're receiving another message from the station," she said quietly. "Queen Rin-Ala requests your presence immediately upon docking. Alone." Deho's jaw tightened slightly. This was the 5th such request in as many days. "Send our standard response. I'll meet with Her Majesty with full diplomatic protocols in place. That means the entire team present and all conversations recorded." Hana nodded, though worry creased her forehead. "Captain, the Valtharians seem to consider this insulting. Their culture places great importance on private audiences with their leader. We might be damaging relations before they even begin." "Noted," Deho said simply. He turned to look at her. "But we follow protocol. Always." Taemin entered the deck, his security uniform crisp despite the long journey. He was built like a wall, which made him perfect for his job as security chief. "Sir, I've reviewed the station layout they sent us. There are at least 40 rooms marked as private audience chambers. I don't like it." "Neither do I," Deho admitted, "which is exactly why we're not going into any of them alone." The docking procedure took 2 hours. The Valtharian technology was advanced far beyond human capabilities, but they accommodated the cruder human systems with patience. When the airlock finally opened, Deho straightened his uniform and led his team forward. The station interior was breathtaking. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with inner light. The air smelled like rain and something sweet that Deho couldn't identify. Tall figures waited for them in the docking bay. The Valtharians looked almost humanoid, but their skin had a crystalline quality that caught the light. Their eyes were large and completely black like pools of deep space. The lead Valtharian stepped forward and bowed slightly. When she spoke, her voice echoed strangely, as if coming from everywhere at once. "Welcome, humans. I am Corvin, first advisor to Queen Rin-Ala. Her Majesty awaits you in the throne room." "Thank you for the warm welcome," Deho replied carefully. He gestured to his team. "This is Communications Officer Hana, Security Chief Taemin, and the rest of my diplomatic staff. We're honored to meet your people." Corvin's dark eyes fixed on Deho with an intensity that made his skin prickle. The Queen requested Captain Deho specifically. "The others may wait in the guest quarters we have prepared." "I appreciate the offer," Deho said smoothly, "but human diplomatic protocol requires the full team to be present at all formal meetings. I'm sure Her Majesty understands the importance of following proper procedures." Something flickered across Corvin's face. Surprise maybe, or annoyance. It was hard to tell with alien expressions. "As you wish. Follow me." The journey through the station took nearly 20 minutes. They passed through corridors that seemed to shift and change color as they walked. Other Valtharians stopped to stare at the humans, their telepathic whispers creating a pressure that Deho could almost feel against his mind. Hana leaned close and whispered, "Sir, I'm picking up telepathic activity all around us. They're talking about us, but I can't understand what they're saying." "Stay alert," Deho murmured back. "Remember your training." The throne room was enormous. The ceiling stretched up so high it disappeared into darkness. The floor was polished crystal that reflected everything like a perfect mirror. And at the far end, seated on a throne that seemed to be carved from a single massive gemstone, was Queen Rin-Ala. She was beautiful in a way that transcended species. Her crystalline skin caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. Her eyes were the deepest black, but they held an intelligence that was immediately obvious. She radiated power like heat from a star. Deho felt the pull immediately. Something in his chest wanted to step forward to approach her to gain her approval. He forced himself to stop at the designated distance and bow formally. "Your Majesty," he said clearly, "I am Captain Deho of Earth. On behalf of humanity, I bring greetings and hope for peaceful relations between our peoples." The Queen studied him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was like music. "Captain Deho, I have waited with great interest for your arrival. Your species is young, but you have accomplished much. Please come closer. I wish to know you better. I'm honored by your interest, Your Majesty, Deho replied, not moving. Perhaps we could begin with formal introductions of both our teams? I believe mutual understanding starts with proper protocol. Corvin shifted uncomfortably beside the throne. Other Valtherian courtiers whispered among themselves. Clearly this wasn't how things usually went. The Queen's expression didn't change, but Deho thought he saw something flicker in those dark eyes. Curiosity, perhaps. Very well, Captain. Let us proceed with your protocols. The formal reception lasted 3 hours. Deho answered every question carefully, always including his team in the conversation. When the Queen suggested a private dinner, he politely declined and proposed a state banquet with full attendance instead. When she offered to show him ancient archives that outsiders rarely saw, he thanked her but said his entire science team would need to be present to properly appreciate such treasures. By the end, Corvin looked frustrated. The other Valtherians seemed confused, but Queen Renala simply watched Deho with those bottomless black eyes, her expression unreadable. As the human team was finally escorted to their quarters, Taman leaned close to Deho. Sir, I think you just insulted the most powerful being in this sector of space. Deho nodded slowly. I know, but better insulted and independent than welcomed and owned. Hana glanced back at the throne room, where the Queen still sat watching their departure. Sir, I picked up something from their telepathic chatter. They've never had anyone refuse a private audience with her. Not once in 3,000 years. Then it's about time someone did. Deho said quietly. He didn't mention that his hands were shaking slightly, or that every instinct in his body had screamed at him to accept her invitations. The Queen was exactly as dangerous as he had feared. Not because she was hostile, but because she was perfect, and humanity had learned long ago that perfection was the most seductive trap of all. 3 weeks had passed since the humans arrived at the Valtherian capital station. In that time, Queen Renala had extended 17 personal invitations to Captain Deho. He had politely declined or modified every single one. Jiwoo sat across from Deho in the human quarters, her fingers drumming nervously on the table between them. She was his second in command, and she had finally decided to speak her mind. Sir, with respect, we need to talk about your strategy. Deho looked up from the reports he was reading. His face showed the exhaustion of too many diplomatic meetings and too little sleep. Go ahead. Every other species in the galactic community has warned us about offending the Valtherians, Jiwoo said carefully. The Kryn Empire told us that rejecting the Queen's personal attention doomed their trade negotiations for a decade. The Thelian Compact said their refusal to join her inner circle resulted in economic sanctions that nearly destroyed them. I've read the same reports, Deho replied calmly. Then why are we doing this? Jiwoo's voice rose slightly with frustration. Why are we deliberately insulting the one person who could make or break humanity's entry into interstellar politics? We could be her allies. Instead, we're acting like she has some kind of disease. Deho was quiet for a moment. Then he gestured to his tablet. Have you read Dr. Yuna's latest analysis? Jiwoo frowned. The xenobiologist? No, I've been focused on political briefings. Read it, Deho said, sliding the tablet across to her. Then tell me if you still think I'm making a mistake. Across the station in the science wing of the human quarters, Dr. Yuna was surrounded by holographic displays showing centuries of Valtherian historical records. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, and her coffee had gone cold hours ago, but she couldn't stop looking at the patterns she had found. Hana entered quietly and set down a fresh cup of coffee. You should rest. You've been at this for 48 hours straight. I can't, Yuna muttered, zooming in on another timeline. Look at this. The Orvan species. 200 years ago, they were invited to establish an embassy here. Within 50 years, their language had been replaced by Valtherian. Their cultural practices were abandoned. They voluntarily gave up their homeworld and moved their entire population to stations built by the Queen. Maybe they just liked it here, Hana suggested, though her voice was uncertain. That's what I thought at first, Yuna said. She pulled up another display. But look at the Kelson Federation. Same pattern. They became close with the Queen, and within a century they had integrated completely into Valtherian society. Their old government dissolved. Their people now identify as Valtherian citizens, not Kelsons. Hana leaned closer, her face growing pale as she studied the data. How many species has this happened to? 17, Yuna said softly. 17 species that accepted close personal relationships with Queen Rennala. All of them eventually lost their independence, not through conquest, not through force, through choice. They chose to become part of her empire because being close to her felt right. Does the captain know about this? I sent him my preliminary findings 2 weeks ago, Yuna said. I think it's why he's been so careful about keeping distance. Back in the diplomatic wing, Jiwoo had finished reading Yuna's report. Her face was troubled. This is concerning. But maybe those species wanted to integrate. Maybe they were better off. Maybe. Daeho agreed. Or maybe they were absorbed so gradually they didn't realize they were giving up who they were until it was too late. Either way, I'm not willing to risk humanity's future to find out. A chime sounded. Another message from the Valtherian palace. Hana's voice came through the intercom. Captain, the Queen has invited you to a private tour of the ancient archives. She says the records there contain knowledge from civilizations that existed before the Valtherians themselves. She's offering to show you secrets that no outsider has ever seen. Daeho closed his eyes briefly. He could feel the temptation pulling at him. Access to ancient knowledge that could advance humanity by centuries. All he had to do was accept one private invitation, send our thanks, and explain that our archaeological team would need to be present to properly document such important historical materials. There was a pause. Then Hana's voice came back quieter. Sir, she specifically said this offer is for you alone. The knowledge is too dangerous to share widely. She wants to determine if you're trustworthy first. Then the answer is no, Daeho said firmly. Polite, respectful, but no. Jiwoo shook her head. Sir, you're turning down the opportunity of a lifetime. Do you understand what you're doing? Yes, Daeho said. I'm protecting humanity from the most dangerous thing in the universe. What's that? A perfect leader who makes you want to follow them, Daeho replied. In the Valtherian throne room, Queen Rennala sat alone, staring at the message from Captain Daeho. Another refusal. Another modification. Another carefully worded response that maintained perfect politeness while keeping absolute distance. Corvin approached cautiously. Your Majesty, the human captain has declined your invitation again. This is unacceptable. We should consider— No, the Queen said softly. She stood and walked to the massive window overlooking the station. Do not threaten them. Do not pressure them. I want to understand this. Understand what, Your Majesty? Why he refuses me, she said. Her reflection in the crystal window looked puzzled, an expression that hadn't crossed her face in centuries. Every species that comes here seeks my favor. They compete for my attention. They would do anything to be granted a private audience. But this human captain treats proximity to me as if it were a threat. He is simply ignorant of proper behavior, Corvin suggested. No, the Queen said thoughtfully. He is not ignorant. His every action is deliberate. His refusals are carefully crafted to avoid offense while maintaining distance. This is not ignorance. This is strategy. She turned to face her advisor. Tell me, Corvin, when was the last time someone said no to me? Corvin thought for a long moment. I cannot recall, Your Majesty. It has been many centuries at least. Exactly, the Queen murmured. She looked back out at the stars. Somewhere in this station, Captain Daeho was going about his duties, deliberately avoiding her with a determination that bordered on obsession. I have been refused by no one for so long. I had forgotten what it felt like. And now this human, from a species barely capable of faster-than-light travel, treats me as something to be avoided. Shall I arrange for more persuasive methods? Corvin asked carefully. No, the Queen said again. I want to know why. Arrange a multi-species diplomatic gathering for next month. Make it impossible for him to refuse without causing an interstellar incident. If he will not meet me privately, then I will confront him publicly. Your Majesty, such a gathering would be witnessed by every major power in this sector. Good, Queen Rennala said. Her black eyes reflected the starlight. Then everyone will hear his answer when I ask him directly why he avoids me with such care. I am very curious to know what he will say. In the human quarters, Daeho stood at his own window, looking out at the same stars. His hands were clasped behind his back and his face was calm, but inside, he felt the constant pull of that power across the station. The Queen was like gravity itself, and every day it took more effort to maintain his orbit without being pulled in. Taemin approached quietly. "Sir, security reports that Valtharian officials have been asking our crew members questions about you. Personal questions, your background, your personality, your weaknesses. Let them ask," Daeho said. "They won't find anything useful, because the truth is very simple. I avoid the Queen because I'm afraid of her. Not afraid she'll hurt us, afraid that she won't, afraid that she'll be exactly what she appears to be, and that will be enough to make us forget who we are. That's a strange kind of fear, sir. It's the most human fear there is," Daeho replied quietly. "The fear of losing yourself to something beautiful." The Great Hall of Convergence was the largest space Daeho had ever seen. It could hold representatives from 100 different species comfortably, and today it seemed like all of them were present. The ceiling was so high that clouds actually formed near the top. The walls glowed with soft light that shifted colors based on the mood of the crowd. Right now, those colors were shifting toward nervous purple and curious orange. Daeho stood with his diplomatic team in the human delegation area. Hana was checking her translation device for the 100th time. Taemin scanned the crowd with the paranoia of a good security chief. Jiwoo stood close to Daeho, her face tight with worry. "This was a trap," she whispered. "A diplomatic trap. We couldn't refuse this gathering without insulting every species here." "I know," Daeho replied quietly. His dress uniform felt too tight. Or maybe that was just his chest constricting with tension. All around them, alien species watched the humans with obvious curiosity. Word had spread about the captain who kept refusing the Queen's invitations. Across the hall in the elevated diplomatic boxes, representatives whispered among themselves. The Kryn ambassador leaned over to speak with the Thelian delegate. "The humans will learn today what we all learned. You do not refuse Queen Rhaenella, not unless you wish to be isolated from galactic society." "Perhaps they are simply foolish," the Thelian replied. "Their species is young. They do not understand the way things work here." "Or perhaps," said a third voice belonging to the Orvan representative, "they are about to provide us all with entertainment. I have not seen the Queen personally address a matter of protocol in decades." A chime rang through the hall, pure and clear. Conversation stopped immediately. Every being in the massive space turned toward the central platform. Reality seemed to bend slightly, and then Queen Rhaenalla was simply there, standing in the center of the platform as if she had always been there. She wore robes that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. Her crystalline skin caught the hall's shifting light and amplified it, making her glow like a living jewel. Her presence filled the space like gravity fills a solar system. Every eye was drawn to her. Every mind felt the pull of her power. Daeho forced himself to breathe normally. He had expected this, but being prepared for the Queen's presence and actually experiencing it were two very different things. "Welcome, friends and allies," the Queen's voice carried to every corner of the hall without seeming to be loud. "We gather today to celebrate the expansion of our galactic community. Today we formally recognize humanity's entrance onto the interstellar stage." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Daeho and his team bowed respectfully. This was supposed to be a ceremony of welcome, nothing more. But Daeho could feel the tension in the air. Something else was coming. The Queen continued through the formal speeches, recognizing humanity's achievements and welcoming them to the community of spacefaring species. It was all very diplomatic and proper. But then she paused, and her dark eyes fixed directly on Daeho. "Captain Daeho of Earth," she said, and the hall went completely silent. "I would speak with you." There was no refusing such a summons in front of the entire diplomatic community. Daeho stepped forward, walking across the polished floor toward the central platform. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. He could feel hundreds of eyes watching him, and the weight of the Queen's attention pressed down like physical force. He stopped at the appropriate distance and bowed. "Your Majesty." The Queen descended from the platform, moving with grace that seemed to defy physics. She walked closer to him, closer than protocol normally allowed. Daeho held his ground, though every instinct screamed at him to either back away or step forward. He did neither. "Captain," the Queen said softly, though everyone in the hall could hear her perfectly, "I have a question that has troubled me for many weeks now. I hope you will answer honestly." "I will do my best, Your Majesty." "Why do you avoid me?" The question was simple, direct, and devastating. I have extended invitations that other species would consider the greatest honor. I have offered you knowledge, friendship, and the benefits of close alliance with the Valtherian Empire. Yet you refuse every private audience. You maintain careful distance at all times. You bring your entire team to every meeting, as if you fear being alone with me. The hall was so quiet that Deho could hear his own heartbeat. He was aware of his team watching, of the hundreds of alien dignitaries leaning forward to hear his response, of the way this moment would define humanity's relationship with the rest of the galaxy. Have I offended you? The Queen continued. Her voice held genuine confusion. Has my species done something to harm yours? Do you find us repulsive, frightening, or unworthy of trust? More murmurs spread through the crowd. This was unprecedented. Queen Renala did not ask questions like this. She did not show vulnerability or confusion. And yet here she was before the entire diplomatic community, asking a human captain why he avoided her. Deho took a slow breath. In the delegation area, he could see Hana with her hand over her mouth. Taemin had gone very still. Jiwoo looked like she was watching a ship crash in slow motion. Your Majesty, Deho said carefully, you have never offended humanity. Your species has shown us nothing but courtesy and patience. I do not find you repulsive. Quite the opposite, in fact. Then why? The Queen asked. Why this deliberate distance? Why do you treat proximity to me as if it were a danger? Because it is dangerous, Your Majesty, Deho said. Shocked whispers filled the hall. Several ambassadors stood up in their boxes. The Kryn representative looked like he might faint. No one spoke to the Queen this way, but Queen Renala simply tilted her head slightly, studying Deho with those bottomless black eyes. Explain, this was it. The moment that would either establish humanity as equals in this community, or mark them as fools who would be isolated and forgotten. Deho straightened his shoulders and spoke clearly so everyone could hear. Your Majesty, I avoid you because you are exactly what humans find most dangerous. You are powerful beyond measure. You are intelligent, charismatic, and by all accounts benevolent. You offer knowledge, protection, and prosperity to those who align with you. You are in every measurable way the perfect leader. The Queen's expression showed surprise. This was clearly not the answer she had expected. Deho continued, his voice steady. That perfection is what makes you dangerous to us. Not because you would harm us, but because we would be tempted to surrender our independence, just to remain in your presence. Humanity has a long history, Your Majesty. A history of building empires around kings and queens who seemed perfect. We gave them our loyalty, our freedom, our very identities. And we did it willingly because being close to power feels good. It feels safe. It feels right. The hall was absolutely silent now. Every being present was listening with complete attention. But then, Deho said, and his voice carried a weight of centuries of human history, we would wake up generations later and realize we had caged ourselves. We had traded who we were for the comfort of following someone else. We lost languages, cultures, ways of thinking. We became smaller versions of ourselves, shaped by the gravity of those perfect leaders. He met the Queen's eyes directly, something that made several ambassadors gasp. You are not dangerous because you are hostile, Your Majesty. You are dangerous because you are irresistible. If I accepted your private invitations, if I let myself be pulled into your orbit, I would be trading humanity's future for the honor of your personal attention, and that is a trade I will not make. The silence that followed was profound. Deho could hear his own breathing, the quiet rustle of fabric as beings shifted in their seats, the soft hum of the station's systems. But no one spoke. No one seemed to know what to say. Queen Renala stood very still, her crystalline features catching the light. For the first time in 3,000 years of rule, she appeared genuinely speechless. Her telepathic presence, which had been pressing against every mind in the hall, withdrew completely. You fear not what I would do to you, she finally said, her voice very quiet, but what you would do to yourselves in my presence. Yes, Your Majesty, Deho confirmed. The Queen looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked around the hall, at the hundreds of species present, many of whom had accepted exactly the kind of close alliance that Deho had refused. Her expression was unreadable. Captain Deho, she said at last, you have given me much to consider. This audience is concluded. She turned and walked back to the platform. Reality bent and she was gone. The hall erupted into noise. Aliens shouted questions, argued with each other, stared at the humans in shock or anger or something that might have been respect. Daeho walked back to his delegation on legs that felt like water. His team surrounded him immediately. "Sir," Hana breathed, "I think you just changed everything. Or destroyed everything," Jiwoo added. Though she didn't sound entirely unhappy about it, Taemin was grinning. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I have ever seen." Daeho said nothing. He just stood there feeling the weight of what he had done, and wondered if humanity would thank him or curse him for it. Queen Renala's private chambers were a place few beings ever saw. The walls were made of crystal that showed not reflections but memories, images from her 3,000 years of rule flowing across the surfaces like water. She stood alone among these memories, watching centuries scroll past. She had not left her chambers in 5 days. Corvin waited at the entrance, uncertain whether to disturb her meditation. The queen had said nothing since the confrontation in the Great Hall. She had simply returned here and locked herself away. Messages from dozens of ambassadors went unanswered. Trade negotiations were delayed. Cultural ceremonies were postponed. The entire Valtherian government seemed to be holding its breath. Finally, the advisor gathered courage and spoke. "Your Majesty, the Council requests guidance. The human delegation awaits your response. Half the galaxy is asking what will happen to them." "Let them wait," the Queen said softly, not turning from the memory walls. "I am thinking. About the human captain's words?" "About truth," she replied. She gestured to the walls around her. "Watch, Corvin. Tell me what you see." The advisor stepped closer and looked at the flowing images. He saw the Orvan species arriving at the capital, eager and hopeful. He saw their ambassador meeting privately with the Queen again and again. He saw their culture slowly shifting, their language changing, their people gradually moving from their homeworld to Valtherian stations. "I see the Orvans joining our empire," Corvin said carefully. "They chose to become part of our civilization. It was their decision." "Yes," the Queen murmured, "their decision. But watch more closely. See how it happened." The memories shifted. The Queen watched herself through centuries of interactions with the Orvans. Each private meeting, each offer of help and protection, each gift of knowledge or technology, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the Orvans stopped being Orvans. They became Valtherians who used to be something else. "They loved me," the Queen said, and there was something like sadness in her voice. "They wanted to be close to me, and I let them because I believed I was helping them, but perhaps the human was right. Perhaps I was not helping them become better. I was helping them become me." Corvin felt uncomfortable. This kind of self-reflection was not something he was used to seeing from his queen. "Your Majesty, you brought them prosperity. You gave them knowledge and security. How is that wrong?" "Because they lost themselves in the process," she said. "And I never noticed. Or perhaps I noticed but told myself it was their choice." She turned to face her advisor. "Tell me truthfully, Corvin. How many of the species in our empire still remember their own original cultures? How many still speak their ancestral languages as their primary tongue?" Corvin thought about it and realized he could not answer. "I do not know, Your Majesty." "Neither do I," she said quietly. "Because I stopped paying attention. I assumed that if they wanted to be close to me, if they chose to adopt our ways, then it was good for them. But the human captain made me see something I had been blind to. I am not a conqueror. I am something perhaps worse. I am gravity." She walked to the chamber's single window which looked out over the capital station. Gravity does not choose to pull things toward it. Gravity does not mean harm. Gravity simply is, and everything nearby slowly falls into orbit. And once caught in that orbit, it becomes difficult to escape. Not because gravity holds them hostage, but because breaking free requires so much energy. Easier to just keep falling. "What will you do?" Corvin asked. "I will speak with Captain Daeho again," the Queen said. "But this time I will listen differently. I want to understand how his species resists what so many others have embraced." She sent the message herself, not through an assistant or advisor. It was simple and direct. "Captain Daeho, I request one meeting. You may bring your entire team if you wish. You may record everything. You may maintain whatever distance you deem necessary, but I would like to speak with you not as queen to diplomat, but as one being trying to understand another. Will you grant me this?" In the human quarters, Daeho read the message 3 times. His team gathered around him, reading over his shoulder. "It's different," Hana said softly. "The tone. She's not commanding or inviting. She's asking. Could be a trick. Taman suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. Ji-woo shook her head. No, I don't think so. I think we actually reached her. The question is, Yuna added, what do we do about it? Daeho thought for a long moment. Then he began typing a response. Your Majesty, I accept. We will meet in one of the neutral conference rooms. My team will be present, but I give you my word that this conversation will be in confidence unless you wish otherwise. The meeting was arranged for the next day. The Queen arrived without her usual entourage. Just her and Corvin, who stood respectfully in the background. She looked different somehow, more present and less like a symbol. Daeho and his team were already seated. They stood and bowed when the Queen entered, but she gestured for them to sit. Thank you for coming, she said. And again there was that difference in her voice. Less authority, more genuine interest. I have spent the past 5 days thinking about what you said in the Great Hall. About being irresistible. About the danger of perfection. Your Majesty, if I caused offense, Daeho began. You did not, she interrupted gently. You gave me a gift, though you could not have known it. You showed me something about myself that I had failed to see. Or perhaps that I had seen but refused to acknowledge. She sat across from the humans, the conference table between them a carefully maintained distance. I have watched the memories of my reign. I have seen how species that grew close to me eventually lost their distinctiveness. I told myself it was their choice, that they wanted to become part of something greater. But you made me wonder if that was truly what happened. Daeho listened carefully. This was not what he had expected. The Queen continued. In your historical records, you have a concept of cultural absorption. When a smaller culture encounters a dominant one, it often vanishes, not through violence but through gradual adoption of the dominant culture's ways. Is this correct? Yes, Your Majesty, Daeho confirmed. We've lost hundreds of human languages and cultures that way, sometimes through conquest, but often through simple proximity to more powerful societies. And you fear this happening to all of humanity, the Queen said. You fear that being close to me would begin a process that, over generations, would result in humans who are Valtherian in all but genetics. Yes, Daeho said simply. The Queen was quiet for a moment. You are the first species to recognize this pattern and resist it. The first to say no to me, not out of hostility but out of self-preservation, and in doing so, you have forced me to examine what I have become over 3 millennia. What have you become, Your Majesty? Hana asked softly. The Queen looked at her, and for the first time the human saw something like vulnerability in those black eyes. I have become the center of a system where everything orbits me. And I told myself this was good, this was helpful, this was bringing unity to the galaxy. But perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps what I created was not unity but uniformity, not cooperation but absorption. She stood and walked to the window. You asked me earlier why you should fear me. Now I will ask you something. How do I stop being what I have become? How does gravity decide not to pull? Daeho stood as well, maintaining his distance but speaking with respect. You don't stop being gravity, Your Majesty. But you can recognize what you are and adjust accordingly. You can give species room to maintain their own orbits instead of pulling them in. And if they want to be pulled in? She asked. If they choose closeness, then you make sure they understand what they're choosing, Daeho said. You make sure they know that proximity has a cost, and you respect those who choose distance instead. The Queen turned back to face him. Is this what humanity needs from me? Distance? Distance and respect, Daeho confirmed. Not isolation, not hostility, but space to be ourselves, even if that means being less than we could be with your help. Because remaining who we are is more important than becoming something greater but losing ourselves in the process. For a long moment, the Queen simply looked at him. Then she did something that shocked everyone in the room. She bowed. Not the slight acknowledgement of a superior to an inferior, but a genuine bow of respect between equals. Captain Daeho, she said, your species is wiser than its years. I accept your terms. Humanity will have the distance it needs, and perhaps in time I will learn from your example how to be a better neighbor instead of an irresistible force. As the meeting ended and the teams prepared to depart, the Queen paused at the door. Captain, one more question. Are you afraid of me still? Daeho considered the question honestly. Yes, Your Majesty. But now I'm afraid in a way I can respect. I'm not afraid you'll harm us. I'm afraid we might harm ourselves by forgetting to be careful around you. The Queen smiled, a rare expression that lit up her crystalline features. Good, never stop being careful, Captain, and never stop being human. The conference room was different this time. Queen Rienala had insisted on a completely neutral space, one that belonged neither to the Valtherians nor to any other species. It was a simple room on an independent trading station halfway between the Valtherian capital and human space. Deho arrived with his full diplomatic team. Dr. Bora, humanity's lead diplomat, had joined them from Earth specifically for this meeting. She was older than Deho, with silver streaking through her hair and eyes that had seen decades of difficult negotiations. This would be her responsibility now. Captain, she said quietly as they prepared to enter. You've done something remarkable, but now comes the hard part. Turning this understanding into an actual treaty that protects humanity for generations. I know, Deho replied. That's why you're here. I can refuse invitations and make speeches. But building lasting frameworks, that's your specialty. The Queen entered alone, which itself was unprecedented. No advisors, no guards, no courtiers, just her. She nodded to the humans and took her seat. I have been considering this for weeks, she began without preamble. How to formalize what Captain Deho has requested. How to create an alliance that respects distance. It goes against every treaty I have ever negotiated. Bora leaned forward. Your Majesty, if I may ask, what do your traditional treaties include? Exchange of embassies with integrated staffs. Joint military exercises and defense pacts. Cultural exchange programs where our people live among each other. Technology sharing agreements. Essentially deep entanglement at every level. The Queen's dark eyes moved across the human team. These create bonds that are meant to be permanent, unbreakable. They create dependency, Deho said quietly. Yes, the Queen agreed, though I did not see it that way until recently. Species bound to me through such treaties cannot easily separate even if they wish to. They become economically, militarily, and culturally reliant on Valtherian support. Jiwoo spoke up from her place beside Deho. So what you're proposing for humanity is something you've never done before. Exactly, the Queen said. I am proposing what I have begun to call the Treaty of Sovereign Distance, an alliance built on respect for separation rather than pursuit of integration. She activated a holographic display that showed the proposed treaty structure. The humans leaned forward to study it. Trade agreements, Bora read aloud, but with limits on Valtherian goods to prevent market dependency. Cultural exchanges, but restricted to academic study rather than population integration. Technology sharing, but only for technologies we specifically request and can sustain independently. Military cooperation only in cases of external threat with no permanent joint bases. It reads like a treaty designed to keep us apart, Hana observed. That is exactly what it is, the Queen confirmed. A treaty that acknowledges humanity's need to develop on its own terms. You will receive some benefits of alliance with the Valtherian Empire, but none of the entanglement that has consumed other species. Yuna raised her hand hesitantly. Your Majesty, forgive me, but what do you gain from this? Traditional alliances give you loyalty, resources, cultural influence. This treaty seems to give you very little in return. The Queen was quiet for a moment. Dr. Yuna, that is a fair question. What I gain is perspective. You humans have shown me something I had forgotten in 3,000 years of rule. The value of independence, the importance of diversity. If I allow humanity to remain distinct, to develop its own path, then perhaps you will continue to show me things I cannot see on my own. She stood and walked to the window overlooking the stars. I have 17 species that now identify as Valtherian. They think like I think. They act like I act. They have become echoes of my own civilization, and in doing so, I have lost 17 different perspectives on the universe, 17 different ways of solving problems, 17 unique approaches to existence. You're saying you want us to stay human so we can be useful to you? Taemin's voice held a note of suspicion. I am saying, the Queen replied carefully, turning back to face them, that I want you to stay human because the galaxy needs humans, not more Valtherians. And perhaps I need to be reminded occasionally that my way is not the only way. Bora studied the treaty document carefully, making notes on her tablet. After several minutes, she looked up. Your Majesty, I need to be frank. This treaty is generous, almost too generous, which makes me concerned about hidden clauses or long-term implications we're not seeing. The Queen actually smiled at that. Your suspicion is wise, Diplomat Bora. But there are no hidden terms. The treaty is straightforward because I want it to work. I want to prove that I can have an alliance based on respect rather than absorption. Why? Deho asked. Why does this matter so much to you? The Queen sat back down, and for a moment she looked tired. Because I am 3,000 years old, Captain. And I have just realized that I have spent much of that time building an empire that looks like me. I have created uniformity and called it unity. I have absorbed cultures and called it progress. Your refusal forced me to see what I had become. This treaty is my attempt to be something better. She looked at each of the humans in turn. I cannot undo what has happened to the Orvans or the Kelsans or any of the others. They are Valtherian now, and most of them are happy that way. But I can make sure it does not happen to humanity. I can prove that I am capable of having an ally without consuming them. Bora and Deho exchanged glances. Then Bora turned back to the Queen. We'll need time to review this with our government, and we'll want to add some additional protections. Of course, the Queen agreed. I expect nothing less. Take the document. Study it, improve it. This treaty should protect humanity's interests absolutely. Over the next 3 weeks, the negotiations continued. Human legal experts combed through every clause. They added provisions, clarified language, established clear boundaries. The Queen accepted every change that strengthened humanity's independence. The other species in the galactic community watched with confusion and growing interest. The Kryn ambassador sent multiple messages asking if the humans had leverage of some kind. The Thelian delegate couldn't understand why the Queen would accept such a limited alliance. But a few species began to watch with something else. Hope, perhaps, or recognition. The signing ceremony was held on the same independent station. This time, media from across the galaxy attended. Queen Renala stood on one side of the ceremonial table, and Deho and Bora stood on the other, with Earth's authorization to sign on behalf of humanity. This treaty, the Queen announced to the assembled observers, represents a new model of alliance, one based not on integration but on sovereign distance. Humanity will remain human. They will develop their own culture, their own technology, their own approach to the galaxy, and the Valtherian Empire will respect that distance while offering friendship and cooperation. She looked directly at Deho. Captain Deho taught me that there is strength in resistance, that refusing to be pulled into orbit does not mean rejecting friendship. It means valuing your own identity enough to protect it. Bora stepped forward. On behalf of humanity, we accept this treaty. We thank Queen Renala for her wisdom and her willingness to create something new. The Treaty of Sovereign Distance will serve as a model for how different species can cooperate without losing what makes them unique. They signed the documents. No telepathic bonding, no ceremonial integration, just signatures on a treaty that formally established distance as a feature, not a flaw. As the ceremony concluded, a small delegation approached nervously. They were Palin, a species that had been negotiating a traditional treaty with the Valtherians for years. Their leader, a being named Vel, spoke hesitantly. Your Majesty, we have watched these proceedings with great interest. We wonder if the Palin might also negotiate a treaty of sovereign distance. The Queen looked at them for a long moment. Then she smiled. Yes, I believe that would be wise. Within an hour, 2 more species had made similar requests. By the end of the day, 5 species were asking to renegotiate their existing treaties or create new ones based on the human model. Corvin approached the Queen as she prepared to depart. Your Majesty, what have we done? The entire structure of our alliances is being questioned. We have done something I should have done centuries ago, the Queen replied. We have given species permission to be themselves. And if that changes the structure of our alliances, then perhaps that structure needed to change. She looked back at the humans, who were celebrating quietly with their team. Captain Deho was right to fear me, but his fear was wise, not cowardly. And his resistance has given me something I did not know I needed. What is that, Your Majesty? A reason to change, she said softly. And maybe, eventually, a friend who sees me as I am rather than as something to worship or fear. Across the room, Deho felt the Queen's gaze and looked up. For a moment, their eyes met. He nodded once, a gesture of respect between equals. She nodded back. The distance between them remained. But now it was a distance built on understanding, not fear. And that made all the difference. 6 months had passed since the signing of the Treaty of Sovereign Distance. The human embassy on the Valtherian capital station was small by design. Only 15 permanent staff members, carefully rotated every year to prevent too much cultural absorption. It was located in the outer ring of the station, maintaining both literal and figurative distance from the throne room at the center. Ambassador Bora sat in her office, reviewing reports. The treaty was working better than anyone had expected. Human trade with the Valtharians was healthy but limited. Technology exchanges happened on human terms. Cultural visits occurred but with strict time limits. Humanity remained distinctly human, but something else was happening. Something the humans hadn't predicted. Hana, who had accepted a position as cultural liaison at the embassy, knocked on Bora's door. "Ambassador, you need to see this. The Palin delegation just arrived for their treaty signing ceremony. They're the third species this month." Bora followed Hana to the observation deck. Below, in one of the formal reception halls, the Palin were signing their own Treaty of Sovereign Distance with Queen Rinala. It looked almost identical to the human version. "That makes 12 species now," Hana said quietly. 12 species that have either renegotiated their existing treaties or signed new ones based on our model. "The Queen is allowing this?" Bora asked, though she already knew the answer. "More than allowing. She's encouraging it." Hana pulled up records on her tablet. "Look at this. She's been meeting privately with leaders from species across the Empire, asking them if they're happy with their level of integration, offering them the option to maintain more distance." Bora studied the data with growing amazement. "This is unprecedented. She's voluntarily loosening her grip on her own empire. Some of them are angry about it," Hana added. "The Orvan delegation complained that offering these treaties to other species suggests their integration was a mistake. They've been Valtharian for generations. This feels like an insult to them." "And what did the Queen say?" "According to reports, she told them that their choice was valid for them, but that doesn't make it the only valid choice. She said different species need different relationships, and she was wrong to assume everyone wanted what the Orvans wanted." Bora sat down heavily. "We didn't just change our relationship with the Valtharians. We started something bigger." Across the station in his temporary quarters, Deho was preparing to return to Earth. His mission was complete. The treaty was signed, the embassy established. Now it was time for him to go home and let the diplomats do their work. But before he left, he had received one final invitation from Queen Rinala. This time he accepted. They met in a small garden on the station's inner ring. It was a quiet place, filled with plants from dozens of worlds. The Queen sat on a simple bench, looking more relaxed than Deho had ever seen her. "Captain," she greeted him as he approached. "Thank you for coming." "Your Majesty," he replied, sitting at the other end of the bench, even now maintaining that careful distance. "I wanted to speak with you before you departed," she said. "To thank you properly." "Thank me? For refusing your invitations and questioning your entire approach to governance?" The Queen laughed to sound like crystal chimes. "Yes, exactly for that. You gave me something precious, Captain. You gave me the truth when everyone else gave me agreement." She gestured to the garden around them. "Every species here is represented by a plant. The Orvans, the Kelsons, all 17 of the fully integrated species. I used to look at this garden and think it represented the beauty of my empire, unity and diversity. And now?" Deho asked. "Now I see that they all grow in the same soil, drink the same water, reach for the same sun. There is diversity in their shapes, but uniformity in their needs. They have all adapted to Valtharian conditions." She looked at him. "You made me realize that true diversity means letting species grow in their own soil, even if that means they're not in my garden at all." "That's a hard realization for a leader," Deho said. "It is," she agreed, "especially one who believes she was helping. But I am learning. 12 species have now chosen distance over integration. At first I felt rejected. Now I realize they're giving me the same gift you did, the chance to be a better neighbor instead of a consuming force." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Deho spoke. "Your Majesty, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Are you lonely?" he asked. "You've ruled for 3,000 years. Everyone either worships you or fears you, and now you're deliberately pushing people away. That must be hard." The Queen was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. "Yes, I am lonely. I have been lonely for centuries, though I did not recognize it. I thought surrounding myself with people who wanted to be close to me would solve that loneliness. But it only made it worse because none of them could truly see me. They saw the queen, the symbol, the perfect leader, not the person. And now I am learning to accept a different kind of relationship. One where species respect me but don't worship me, cooperate with me but don't depend on me. It is lonelier in some ways, but it is more honest. She smiled slightly. And perhaps eventually I will find that honest relationships are more satisfying than worshipful ones, even if there are fewer of them. Deho nodded. For what it's worth, Your Majesty, I think you're making the right choice. It takes courage to change when you don't have to. I had to, she said simply. You showed me that. You were willing to risk everything to maintain your species' independence. That kind of courage demanded a response. If I had punished you for it, I would have proven I was exactly what you feared. But if I could learn from it, perhaps I could become something better. She stood, and Deho stood with her. Captain Deho, I expect we will not see each other often. The treaty requires distance, after all. But know that I consider you a friend. Perhaps the first real friend I have had in a very long time. The feeling is mutual, Your Majesty, Deho replied. He hesitated, then added, though I will still be careful around you. Good, she said firmly. Never stop being careful. Your caution is what keeps both of us honest. Back on Earth, news of the Treaty of Sovereign Distance had spread. Deho returned to find himself something of a celebrity. The man who said no to the most powerful being in the galaxy and lived to tell about it. But more importantly, the strategic implications were being debated at the highest levels of human government. Minister of Interstellar Relations Park Jin-ho called a meeting of top officials to discuss the situation. The galactic power structure is changing, Jin-ho explained to the assembled leaders. For centuries, the Valtherian Empire has been the central hub of interstellar politics. Every major species was either part of her empire or seeking to become part of it. But now, thanks to Captain Deho's actions, there's a new model emerging. He displayed a chart showing the growing number of sovereign distance treaties. 12 species have adopted this model so far. Intelligence suggests at least 20 more are considering it. We're witnessing a shift from a hub-and-spoke system centered on the Valtherians to a more distributed network of independent civilizations. One of the military leaders spoke up. Is this good for humanity? We're new to interstellar politics. Maybe we need the stability of the old system. Or maybe, suggested another voice, we've accidentally become the catalyst for a new era, one where species maintain their independence while still cooperating. That could be very good for humanity. We're not strong enough to compete in a system dominated by the Valtherians, but in a system of equals, we have a chance. Jin-ho nodded. That's the prevailing analysis. Captain Deho didn't just secure humanity's independence. He potentially changed the balance of power across this entire sector of space. The question now is how we use that position. Meanwhile, on the Valtherian capital station, Queen Rhinala was having a similar meeting with her advisors. Corvin presented his analysis with clear concern in his voice. Your Majesty, the Empire is changing rapidly. 23 species are now requesting sovereign distance treaties. If this continues, we may lose the unified structure that has maintained peace for centuries. Or, the Queen countered, we may create a more stable structure, one based on genuine cooperation rather than dependency. But Your Majesty, our strength has always come from unity, from species bound to us through deep integration. Our apparent strength, she corrected. But was it real strength if it was built on absorbing others? True strength would be having allies who choose to cooperate because it benefits them, not because they have no other choice. She stood and looked out over her empire. Corvin, I have been thinking about this for months. What the humans showed me was not just about them. It was about all of us. I built an empire by making species need me, but need is not the same as respect. And I would rather have the respect of independent species than the need of dependent ones. Even if it means less direct control. Especially if it means less direct control, she said firmly. Control is easy. Cooperation is hard. But only one of them builds something that lasts beyond my lifetime. And I am beginning to think about legacy, Corvin, about what I leave behind when I eventually pass. You are immortal, Your Majesty. Nothing is truly immortal, she said softly. And even if I live another 1,000 years, I want those years to mean 1 year after the Treaty of Sovereign Distance was signed. The galaxy looked different. Ambassador Bora stood in the Council Chamber of Independent Species, a new organization that had formed specifically for civilizations with sovereign distance treaties. 27 species were now members. The chamber itself was located on a neutral station, deliberately positioned away from any major power's territory. The Palin representative, Vel, was speaking. "We propose a mutual defense pact, but one that respects each species' sovereignty. No permanent military integration, no shared command structure. Simply an agreement that if one member is attacked, others will provide support as they are able." It was a far cry from the traditional Valtharian defense pacts, which required complete military integration and gave the Queen ultimate authority over all forces. This new model was messier, less efficient, but it left each species in control of their own military. Bora listened carefully as the debate unfolded. Some species wanted stronger commitments. Others feared even this limited agreement was too much. But they were talking, negotiating, finding compromises. It was democracy in action, slow and frustrating and beautiful. After the session, Vel approached Bora. "Ambassador, I wanted to thank your species again. The Palin were weeks away from signing a traditional integration treaty with the Valtharians. We would have lost ourselves and not even realized it was happening. Your Captain Deho's actions gave us time to reconsider. We didn't do it to start a revolution," Bora said honestly. "We were just trying to protect ourselves." "Sometimes the bravest acts are the most selfish ones," Vel replied with what might have been a smile. "You wanted to survive as humans. In doing so, you gave the rest of us permission to want the same thing." On Earth, Captain Deho had returned to his regular duties. He was no longer a diplomat or a celebrity. He was simply a ship captain again, running cargo routes between human colonies. It was peaceful, quiet work, and he preferred it that way. But today he had received a message that pulled him back into the larger galactic drama. It was from Queen Renala herself, marked personal and private. He read it twice, then called his first officer, Lieutenant Sung Min. "Sir?" Sung Min asked as he entered the captain's quarters. "How would you feel about a detour?" Deho asked. "The Valtharian capital station. The Queen has requested my presence." Sung Min raised an eyebrow. "Is that wise, sir?" "I thought the whole point was maintaining distance." "It is," Deho agreed. "But sometimes distance includes occasional visits, and I'm curious what she wants." The journey to the capital station took 3 weeks. When they arrived, Deho was struck by how different the station felt. The oppressive sense of centralized power had lessened somehow. The station was still impressive, still beautiful, but it no longer felt like the only thing that mattered in the galaxy. The Queen met him in the same garden where they had spoken a year before. She looked the same, crystalline and perfect, but her manner was different, more relaxed, less like she was performing the role of queen and more like she was simply being herself. "Captain Deho," she greeted him warmly. "Thank you for coming. I know it's a long journey." "Your Majesty," he replied, sitting on the bench across from her, still maintaining that distance. "Your message said you had something important to discuss." "I wanted to show you something," she said. She gestured, and a holographic display appeared between them. It showed a map of the local galactic sector. 1 year ago, this is what the political structure looked like. The map showed the Valtharian Empire as a massive hub in the center, with lines connecting to dozens of integrated species. A few independent species floated on the edges, too far away to be absorbed or too powerful to be threatened. "And this is what it looks like now," she said, changing the display. The new map was radically different. The Valtharian Empire was smaller, still significant, but no longer overwhelming. Around it, a network of independent species connected by dotted lines representing sovereign distance treaties. The Council of Independent Species showed as a separate node, not dominated by any single power. 27 species have chosen independence over integration, the Queen said. The structure that held for centuries has been fundamentally altered. Because of one conversation in a public hall? "Is this what you wanted to show me?" Deho asked. "How much things have changed?" "Partly," she said. "But more than that, I wanted to tell you what I've learned from this change." She stood and walked to the edge of the garden, looking out at the stars. "For 3,000 years, I believed my purpose was to unite the galaxy, to bring species together under one banner. I thought I was creating peace and prosperity. And in many ways I was. But I was also creating something else. Uniformity. Dependency. A galaxy where everything slowly became the same." "You've said this before," Deho said gently. Yes, but now I understand it differently. She turned to face him. I thought loosening my grip would weaken my empire. Instead, it has made it stronger. The species that remain fully integrated do so by choice now, because they genuinely believe it's best for them. And the species that chose independence respect me more than those who worship me ever did. Because you gave them a choice, Daiho said. Because you made me give them a choice, she corrected. You forced me to see that true power is not making others need you. It's earning their respect even when they don't need you. Perhaps especially when they don't need you. She returned to the bench and sat, closer to Daiho than she had before, but still respecting that boundary between them. Captain, you asked me once if I was lonely. I said yes. But I realize now that I was describing the wrong kind of loneliness. I was lonely despite being surrounded by people. Now I am lonely because I have fewer people close to me. But this new loneliness is honest, and I find I prefer honest loneliness to false companionship. You're learning to be alone without being isolated, Daiho observed. Yes, and it's harder than I expected, but more satisfying, she smiled slightly. I have you to thank for that lesson. You were willing to be isolated to avoid losing yourself. That courage taught me that sometimes distance is the price of integrity. Daiho considered his words carefully. Your Majesty, I think you're giving me too much credit. I was just trying to protect my species. The fact that it helped you was accidental. The best lessons often are, she replied. But whether you intended it or not, you've changed me. Changed my empire. Changed the galaxy's political structure. That's a significant legacy for one captain who just wanted to keep his people independent. Speaking of legacy, Daiho said, what is your legacy now? If you could look back from 1,000 years in the future, what would you want to see? The Queen was quiet for a long moment. I would want to see a galaxy full of diverse species, each pursuing their own path but able to cooperate when needed. I would want to see that my empire became a partner, rather than a parent to other civilizations. And I would want to see that I learned to let go before I consumed everything around me. That's a good legacy, Daiho said. It's a human legacy, she replied. You taught it to me. Your species has been spacefaring for less than a century. But you understand something about independence that took me millennia to learn. That says something profound about humanity. Or something terrifying, Daiho said with a slight smile. We're stubborn to a fault. We'd rather risk destruction than give up control of our own destiny. Stubborn, yes, the Queen agreed. But also wise. Because in the end, a destiny that isn't truly yours is just someone else's plan for you. As their meeting drew to a close, the Queen handed Daiho a small crystal. This is a communication device. Direct link to me, no intermediaries. Use it if humanity ever needs to reach me quickly, or if you simply want to talk. I would appreciate occasional conversations with someone who sees me as I am, rather than as what I represent. Daiho accepted it carefully. This feels like the beginning of friendship, Your Majesty. Perhaps it is, she said, though a careful friendship with appropriate distance. The best kind, Daiho agreed. As he prepared to leave, the Queen spoke once more. Captain, I have one final thing to tell you. The galaxy will remember your name, the captain who said no to Queen Rinella and changed the course of interstellar politics. Some will admire you, others will resent you for disrupting comfortable arrangements, but all of them will remember that one human had the courage to resist perfection. I didn't resist perfection, Daiho said. I resisted the illusion of perfection. There's a difference. Yes, the Queen said softly, there is, and that might be the most important lesson of all. Daiho's ship departed the Valtherian capital station that evening. As he watched it recede in the view screen, Sungmin joined him on the bridge. How was the meeting, sir? Enlightening, Daiho said. I think we've made a genuine friend. A powerful, potentially dangerous friend who we need to remain careful around. But a friend nonetheless. Yes, that's a strange kind of friendship. It's a human kind of friendship, Daiho replied. We're good at maintaining relationships with people we don't fully trust. It's one of our better survival traits. Back in her garden, Queen Rinala sat alone among the plants representing her empire. But she was not